Going places, getting there.
91.3, welcome back to the show. It's Drive Time. The Institute for Justice and Reconciliation and the Hague Institute for Global Justice are convening an annual Transitional Justice in Africa Fellowship program. The program is being held in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and The Hague. To give us more insight on this interesting and exciting program is Miss Friederike Bubenzer, who is Senior Project Leader for the Transitional Justice in Africa Fellowship Program and also Head of the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation's Great Horn Project, which includes close work on reconciliation processes in South Sudan. Friederike, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me and for that very smooth and perfect introduction.
Sure. Yeah, okay, I can take the sweat off my forehead now. Got that one right. Friederike, let's have a look now. The transitional justice, let's have a look at that one quickly. Do you think that transitional justice is something that doesn't quite get the focus that it deserves? I mean, in South Africa, we went through a transitional process, and a lot of countries, when they end a conflict, have to also go through a transitional justice process. Do you think we don't understand this sufficiently?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think, very well picked up. And I think we see a lot of countries returning to war shortly after a peace agreement has been signed or a conflict has come to an end as a result of the fact that, wounds haven't been addressed and the past hasn't been sufficiently dealt with. And I think, this field is relatively new, certainly in terms of the theory and the sort of concrete thinking around it. And a lot of research is being done, and there's a lot of movement around it on the continent. But certainly it needs a lot more, especially from a sort of donor perspective as well, putting funds into processes that support this in a sustainable manner.
As a journalist, and I've got the advantage perhaps that I've covered a lot of conflict over the decades. The first thing that I observe is that a peace process, for example, is never between friends, it's always between enemies. And yet the expectation is for them to kiss and to be happy in making up, when in fact they're very unhappy partners. I'm sure you'll agree that's going to be the most critical juncture when the transitional process has to come in. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think, it's at some level, of course, it's about compromise, as in any relationship, whether it's personal or political. And I think that is a process that takes a long period of time. And it requires a fair amount of political will from both sides to contribute to the building of a united, peaceful nation. And I think that's something that is very difficult to achieve in a lot of nations where a huge amount of issues are at stake, financially, economically, politically. We have a lot of leaders who are backed by very, very powerful lobby groups. And a lot of interests are at stake. And so getting to that agreement is a long-term process, and I think one that includes a huge amount of consultation and inclusivity, and takes time. And I think we often get very impatient with these things, as I think we see in South Africa. I think a lot of us want things to move a lot faster. These things do take time, and wounds take a long time to be overcome, for hostilities to be forgiven. So it's not a simple game.
Now, let's have a look at the Transitional Justice in Africa Fellowship Program. It's going to be unrolled, Johannesburg, Cape Town, and The Hague. How exactly does this fit into what we've been discussing?
So the institute that I work for here in Cape Town was formed after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and a lot of African countries have come to IJR in the post-1994 period, and since IJR was formed 15 years ago, to get a sense of how we got to where we got. And really the sense is with the development of the transitional justice field and processes really gaining momentum on the continent over the last years, there is a need to equip transitional justice practitioners with concrete skills and experiences. And I think nobody is better equipped to do that than the people who were involved in such processes themselves and those who have studied them closely. So the fellowship program is really an opportunity for mid-career professionals from other African countries who are working on these issues to come to South Africa, to come to IJR for a 2 to 3 week period to engage very closely with these issues with practitioners. So right now downstairs in our boardroom, we have Professor Jeremy Sarkin, who is an expert on these issues. He's Emeritus Professor of Law at the University of the Western Cape, and he's going to be talking to them for 3 sessions on, where transitional justice has come from, back to the Nuremberg trials, back to the first Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, and then talking about issues of reparations. talking about restorative and punitive justice in these issues. So, of course, at the same time, it's also an opportunity for us as an organization working in Africa to really get first-hand experiences and insights from these individuals who are at the coalface of these issues. So it's a mutual learning process.
And it's interesting you say it's a mutual learning process, so that sort of indicates the appropriate amount of humility in these processes, because my next question was going to be, do you think that sometimes in these scenarios, as South Africans perhaps, we tend to come across as arrogant? We may not mean it, but because we've been through it, we think we know everything.
I would actually say no to that. I would say that a lot of people that I've spoken to who are involved in our reconciliation process would quite openly acknowledge that there were flaws in our process and that there were things that we overlooked. So I don't think we are arrogant. I think we're aware that we tried. We succeeded on some levels, but we failed on others, and we're trying, in a sense, to undo some of the gaps that we unintentionally left open at the time. So. And I think what is key, and I think what we're trying to do through this program as well, is to highlight that which we didn't do properly, and to share those experiences and to try and prevent those mistakes from being made again in other countries.
And Friederike, our last question, when you have these fellowship programs, do you get feedback? I mean, do you think that you are slowly but surely making a difference to the landscape of transitional justice in the continent?
I'll be arrogant now and say yes.
No, you can. You're welcome to say that.
Yeah. No, I think it's also about creating a network of people who know about each other and, building on one another's strengths. So there's some of us who are experts on the judicial side. Some of us have a more restorative and maybe psychosocial expertise in this field. And I think bringing these people together through the program is rewarding for IJR and it's rewarding for them. I've seen a lot of people over the last 6 years of my coordinating of this program growing into more senior positions and really making decisions in this realm in their countries that, of course, we can't say were directly inspired by the program, but it would be, I think they'd be quite happy if I said that some of the inspiration of where they are in today was stimulated through the fellowship program and through their time here in South Africa.
Friederike Bubenzer, who's a senior project leader for the Transitional Justice in Africa Fellowship Program. She's also head of the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation's Greater Horn Project, which also includes close work on reconciliation in South Sudan. Thanks for chatting to us and everything of the best.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.